In today's 60-second investor, I ask a very interesting question of what is a fundamental value of Bitcoin. I'm piggybacking off a discussion on the Market Hive podcast of Bilal Hafez, who interviews a gentleman by the name of Ari Paul. Now, Ari was a former market maker at Susquehanna. He also ran the University of Chicago Endowment Fund. So a very, very talented, very well-versed financial guy. And he has I think, a unique and interesting perspective on how we should all value Bitcoin. Now, the critical problem with Bitcoin, of course, the fundamental value of Bitcoin is that it doesn't have any cash flows. It's not like a stock. It's not like a bond. So there's no revenue stream. And therefore, any conventional ways of measuring it really don't exist. Effectively, basically, the most interesting thing you can say about Bitcoin is that it's become very, very quickly the universal store of value. In that sense, it's very, very similar to gold, which is also essentially an asset that has no utility and certainly no yield and no income, but yet is considered to be conventionally, based on nothing more than social convention, as a store of value. So if you accept the same social convention for Bitcoin as you do for gold, then the argument becomes very interesting, because Bitcoin is a far superior store of value than gold. As Ari says, it's basically a Swiss bank in your pocket. The critical advantage, the great competitive advantage of Bitcoin is its portability. It's simply impossible to take $2 billion worth of gold in your back pocket, but it's extremely easy to put $2 billion worth of Bitcoin on your flash drive and go anywhere in the world and reconstitute your wealth. So if that's the case, if Bitcoin essentially is becoming the new store of value in the world, then Ari makes this very interesting argument that essentially it is a proxy for offshore banking. Because if you think what offshore banking is, it is essentially a very elaborate way to protect people's wealth away from the arbitrary reach of the state. Now, whether you agree with offshore banking or disagree with offshore banking, that's immaterial. The more interesting question here is to understand that this market, the offshore banking market, is actually $33 trillion in size. It's an enormous, enormous market. Now, of course, not all of it is essentially parked in store of value. Most of the offshore market assets are in economically productive assets like stocks and bonds. So you really can't compare it to Bitcoin one for one. It's not an apples to apples comparison. But if you basically sort of assume that 10% of the offshore banking is sitting essentially in cash, gold, or other store of value assets, then effectively you could make a very legitimate claim that it's about a $3 trillion market for store of value instruments. And in that case, there becomes a very interesting way to value Bitcoin, because Bitcoin right now is essentially valued at a little bit less than $1 trillion. And that means that just on a purely fundamental basis as to how the market values store of value assets, you could make a very legitimate case that there's certainly more upside, perhaps up to 3 times the upside, for Bitcoin to be fully valued, given the social conditions as they exist today in the markets. Now, if you're interested in trading Bitcoin or any other crypto asset, I really recommend you guys visit the BK Crypto Crusher website, which is where my partner Kathy produces weekly trade ideas on all the top 20 crypto assets using the end of day data, and produces some interesting and very, very valuable momentum trades in crypto. So hope you guys enjoy all of this. I'll see you all in the markets, and please visit us at 60secondinvestor.com.